So glad all of you are joining us this Thursday before Christmas. We will not be having Bible study next week because I think it's Christmas Eve on Thursday, isn't it?
No.
Yeah.
Or is that
No, Friday.
Thursday
Friday.
before Christmas?
Yeah, you said you wanted to do it next week.
Oh, I did?
You did,
Oh,
and that you didn't want to do it the week after because you're on
right.
vacation.
All
Because
right. Never
that's what
mind.
it says on the video that I handed out today.
So we will have Bible study next Thursday because it's not Christmas Eve.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you,
We
Dennis.
won't be.
If you're busy shopping for your wife, then we understand.
You know, Gail, I think I might be busy shopping for my wife. That is so understanding and kind. I appreciate it. If I'm not here next Thursday, you guys can do a Bible study, yourselves on Zoom, because Zoom is awesome. The modern technology, you got to love it. So anyway, okay, so next Thursday we're on, but the Thursday after that, I'm going to be in Vermont. So you can forget about it.
Okay.
We're visiting my wife's sister, Sarah, and her family. They live outside of Burlington. So that should be fun. My nieces and nephew are close in age to my kids. And so, it's always good getting the cousins together. And that'll be good. My mother-in-law will be up there for a little while too. So, it'll be Christmas. And I don't think they have snow up there yet. So that'll be interesting. Weather's crazy. I have friends from seminary who are in Buffalo, and it was 60 something degrees in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that's nuts, It was like, what, 60 something today? So anyway, all right. Enough about the weather. We've been talking about covenants, and for those of you who weren't here last week, you don't have to tune in, every week, but just to kind of bring people up to speed a little bit, we were looking at the new covenant that's described in Jeremiah 31 and how that particular understanding of God initiating a new covenant got carried into the New Testament, and Jesus' death and resurrection was understood through the lens of a prior text. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So you're Jewish. How do you understand what's going on? How do you understand with what God's doing? Well, you're going to look back at how people understood what God did in the past. And do they fit? Do they fit within a context? What's the continuity between what God did hundreds of years before and what God's doing now? How do you understand what God's doing now? Well, you kind of figure out how they kind of match up. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much truly. That's kind of theology in a nutshell. Someone just keeps stomping up and down the stairs, and I don't know why. Okay. Anyway, I'm down in my basement. That's where my little work area is, and the house is in the basement. But anyway, and now I just lost my train of thought. What was I talking about?
Jeremiah.
Jeremiah and the tying
Connection.
of the New Testament and Old Testament covenants.
Right. It's sort of the biblical idea. And again, part of the whole purpose of doing this sort of Thursday night Bible study and kind of taking a topic, looking at the topic in scripture, part of the reason for doing it the way I've been doing it is, again, to sort of make connections between the different books of the Bible. Okay. And then how do we think about 2021, about our lives, in light of other people's experience of God, meaning scripture. Scripture is very simply other people's understanding of God. Now, of course, there's more to it than that. Scripture is scripture because a community of faith has said these books are special in a special way. Okay.
Mhm.
And for centuries, you know, in the case of the New Testament, for 2,000 years, we've made sense of what God's doing in the world in light of what God did 2,000 years ago. How did people understand it 2,000 years ago? Okay. There's a certain level in which these texts kind of stand the test of time. And why is that? What is it about these texts that do that? Whereas, you know, Oprah's book of the year for 2017 doesn't. Anyone remember what Oprah's book of the year was for 2017? I don't. Right? I mean, but the book of Acts in the New Testament, that's kind of like, okay, yeah, all right, I get it. Does it make sense? All right. Case in point, I had a funeral today, a guy named Dave Halter. You St. Luke's folks, Dave's oldest son is also named Dave. I don't think it's a Dave Jr., but Dave, the son, kind of grew up with Jerry and Merlin Jordan's twin boys, Terry and Tony.
Mhm.
Terry and Tony are a couple years younger than Marty. All right.
Mhm.
So the Jordan boys grew up with Dave Halter Jr. And they kind of got Dave involved in St. Luke's way back when they were in their 20s. So Dave Sr. died, and Dave Jr., you know, needed someone to do the funeral. So he reached out to his friends, the Jordans. The Jordans got in touch with me. They got in touch with me. And so that was Dave Halter's funeral today. Dave Halter Sr. and his wife, Linda, moved. They retired up in the Pennsylvania mountains near the New York border, near Elmira, New York, I think. I think that's the right town. Anyway, they've been up there like 12 years, 13 years or so. But Psalm 23. Okay, the Lord is my shepherd, 3,000 years old. And yet, why does it still speak to people? Because there's something about that text that speaks to sort of the ultimate realities when it comes to understanding life. And not only just life, but life in touch with God, some higher transcendent reality. Okay. The scriptural texts do that in a way that nothing else really does. This is me personally speaking. That's my own personal opinion. And so if we can look at the text and make connections, then when something comes up, why is Psalm 23 able to connect with people? Because when you sit down, you look at the text and you talk about it, then you make the connections. All right. Jesus died on a cross, was raised 3 days later. People encountered him after the resurrection, the gift of the Holy Spirit, everything around Jesus. How did they understand it? For those first disciples, they would go back to the Old Testament. And they would, you know, flip through the Old Testament and say, okay, here's something that points to what God just did. And that's where the covenant language really, really comes from, especially when it's brought into the New Testament. Y'all with me still so far?
Mhm.
All right. My own personal approach to the Bible and my own personal opinion about it is when we can think of the text in that way, I think it makes it easier to read. You know, Jeremiah on the surface can be can seem kind of obscure, and I'm going to pull it up again. All right. The screen share. Let's find Jeremiah 31. Okay, can y'all see that?
Yes.
Jeremiah 31. Toward the end of the chapter. All right. Now, it really would be, I mean, this would be kind of one of those Bible studies that we could spend weeks on. I mean, you could spend weeks on just Jeremiah alone and putting this passage in the context of the larger message of Jeremiah and run with it. I mean, till the cows come home, truly. But we're not going to do that. But again, early Christians, how do we understand Jesus' death and resurrection? Why did he die? What was God doing? What does this mean in terms of our relationship to God and who Jesus is? And so they look at this text and they say, aha, new covenant. Covenants are made in blood. We sort of talked about that in the past. Why is it the covenants are made in blood? Well, I don't know. That's kind of what they did back then in the Old Testament. And so they see Jesus as a sacrificial lamb. Okay, where does that image of a sacrificial lamb come from? Again, back in the Old Testament. All kinds of things going on with that image. The role of the law. I will put my law within them. To really understand what that law means, you should probably capitalize it. All right, write it on their hearts. It's one thing, and then know the Lord, knowledge, hearts. I mean, God's not writing it on their minds. Did y'all catch that? What would it mean if God said, this is a covenant that I'll make with the house of Israel after those days, says the Lord. I will put my law within them and I'll write it on their minds. What's the difference?
Their hearts or their
You write it on your mind to remember it. You write it on your heart to make it part of your being and your soul.
Okay.
Mhm.
So run with that. What exactly does that mean?
It's with you then forever.
Okay.
Eternal. Mhm.
Part of the love, part of love, right?
Okay. It's one thing to know what to do. It's a whole nother thing to want to do it. Right?
Mhm.
I have a 17-year-old. He knows he should go to class. It doesn't matter that it's written in his mind. Does he want to go to class? No. So there's a problem there with the covenant if it's only written on your mind. Plus, there's a lot of things that we know in our hearts, but we might not understand it. That's the other thing. Our culture puts a high premium on education and on learning and knowledge and all this other stuff. But at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter nearly as much as what's in your heart. Do you act? It's one thing to know that you're supposed to love your neighbor. It's a whole nother thing to, take a meal and walk 100 yards down the road and drop it off at a stranger's house. Did y'all hear the difference there?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Again, a text 3,000 years old. I just think to me, it's just kind of mind blowing. This sort of ancient wisdom. I will be their God, they shall be my people. All right. So anyway, I did talk about know the Lord. Know it's an intimate knowledge. You can know something according to a book, and it's a whole nother thing to know it and experience it in a deeper kind of way. That word know in Hebrew is more of an intimate type of knowledge versus like an intellectual type of knowledge. That makes sense?
It's a deep.
Or- Yeah. And as I said earlier, this passage, the New Covenant, that language gets picked up and used in the New Testament, especially in the book of Hebrews. It gets quoted in full. You know, they don't just, the other thing, again, I think I'd mentioned this before, when everything is handwritten, you're gonna like, you're gonna not waste time or ink when you're writing everything by hand. So when you handwrite something and you write it all out word for word, that tells you something. That means it's super, super important. It's not like shorthand. So in modern day terms, if you wanted to make a reference, let's say you're writing an article and you want to make a reference to the Declaration of Independence. And the point you want to make, you want to take the point of the Declaration of Independence and make reference to it and put it in what it is you're writing. Are you going to quote the entire Declaration of Independence? No. You're pretty much going to say those first few key words. We hold these truths to be self-evident. And then, you know, if you remember from high school or whatever, that we've been endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights. The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, boom. You're not going to quote the entire passage, but you'll quote life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And then you'll keep on writing. For the writer of Hebrews, okay, to quote this entire passage from Jeremiah 31 tells us something.
But
Again, I'm
now
sorry.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If, you know, if God put this, you know, this in our minds and in our hearts, how did all the hatred and violence get through?
Anyone want to take a stab at that one?
Because God also gave us
Is
free
this
will.
where the devil comes into play, or is it that others didn't believe in this?
But he gave us free will.
I would say kind of yes to all that. What else? What do y'all think?
Yeah, because the fact that we have free will, we can choose, even if we choose something that's really bad, hopefully what's written in our hearts will help give us that conscience to know that we're doing wrong. But it's the free will that gets kind of caught up in the middle.
Hold that thought, because you asked a very good question, Joyce. All right. So why does all that happen if God has written his law in our hearts? You know, it's sin. I mean, sin's pretty much it, right? You go to Romans 7, and this is kind of when Paul trying to think how to kind of describe this
Inner conflict.
at this
The
point
inner
of at this point of Paul's letter. So if you back up a little bit, Romans chapter 3, Paul basically says we're all sinners, period. if you were to like to compare human behavior with the requirements of the law, we're all sinners. Jews are sinners, Gentiles are sinners, we're all sinners. But thanks be to God that we are made right with God, not through the works of the law, but through faith in what Christ has done. Okay? It's Romans 3. Romans 4, he gives a bunch of examples from the Old Testament, mostly Abraham, or really the one major example is from Abraham. And then Romans 5 is all about, since we've been made right with God through faith, we have peace, the gift of the Holy Spirit. Because one person sinned, all humanity is under sin. How much more that we've been reconciled to God through one man, Jesus Christ. Romans chapter 6, he relates it to baptism. You've died to sin in baptism, so live a new life. But that's all well and good in theory. But, Paul kind of goes on and then he says, but I'm flesh. I'm flesh and blood. We know that the law is spiritual. It's written on our hearts. God's written on our hearts. But I'm of the flesh, sold into slavery under sin. I do not understand my own actions. I don't do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. Now, if I do what I do not want, I agree that the law is good. And then he kind of goes on about how the law is good, but he's not because he's flesh and blood. And so you got this law, this kind of war within himself.
Right. I can will what is right, but I cannot do it.
Yeah. Now, I think Jeremiah's point, the point in Hebrews, still is true. When the law is in our hearts and we act out of the law in our hearts, that faith, that love of God for other people, beautiful things happen. I think we kind of know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
By the same token, though, good people do bad stuff. And there's that kind of, again, that inner struggle, the good, for I don't do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do.
Well, that verse 21 says that when I want to do what is good, evil lies close at hand. So it is like Joy said, it's like the devil is lying close at hand whenever he doesn't want us to do good. So he's going to be there to give us trouble when we want to do what's good. Somewhere else it says that he prowls around like a roaring lion.
Yes, right.
He can devour. So yeah, we're in a battle here on earth. We're in a battle between good and evil.
Yeah. That little image, the little angel on your shoulder, the good angel and bad angel, from cartoons. There's a lot of truth to that. What was that that Clark said? Was he agreeing?
Where is it?
But anyway, so yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. Evil lies close at hand.
Scary.
Well, yeah, it is. It can be. It really can be. And sometimes it can be really mundane too. You go to the grocery store, you're going to buy something for the food pantry, and oh, look, there are lottery tickets right there. Now, I'm not busting on people who buy lottery tickets, because I bought one or two. Right? Or are you going to? Now, I had one parishioner who sold them at a convenience store. And she said it was kind of scary. There are guys who would come in every week and spend $20, $30 a week on lottery tickets. That adds up, at some point, you gotta wonder. Anyway. You know, I find it scary that the vice industries, y'all ever heard that expression, the vice industries?
I would guess
Vice
that
industry.
tobacco, alcohol, gambling.
They're booming.
Yeah,
Driving to Virginia Tech the other day on Turnpike. It's been a while since I've gone, a few months. Big, huge construction site right across from the Classic Car Auto Mall, right there in Morgantown.
hmm
Y'all know where I'm talking about? It's a casino.
really.
Really?
What the hell? Yeah, see, really, right? No one, y'all didn't know?
I haven't been on the turnpike for a while.
Well, we don't go that way. We
Yeah.
don't go to Morgantown.
Yeah, it's a casino. Right there at the intersection of Route 10 and the Turnpike.
Mine, what was it? It was called Mom, the Outlet Mall. Morgan.
Oh, the MOM, yeah.
That's a casino?
Right across the street. No, this is a brand new building.
Oh.
I thought it was going to be like an auto dealership or a movie theater. It's literally right across the street from what used to be like this kind of like almost like when we moved to Pennsylvania, it was like a Pennsylvania Dutch kind of home goods craft type mall.
It was a mall, yeah.
It was pretty cool. And then it up and closed, and then it was nothing for a long time. And now I think they have cars there, classic cars.
They do.
There's a little Hampton Inn.
Mhm.
But literally across the highway is a casino, Hollywood Casino. I'm like, since when did a casino come into Morgantown? Like, we don't need a casino in Morgantown. Anyway, that's me being a Puritan. I'm normally not a Puritan, y'all.
Well, the
I
Amish,
don't get all moralistic. I'm sorry, what?
the Amish need someplace to gamble. I'm gonna guess there's gonna be buggy stalls outside that sucker.
Okay, now that's funny.
I don't think so.
You know, I don't often get moralistic, but that kind of thing, I just think is unnecessary. When the casino, Valley Forge Casino, opened up right outside of Valley Forge, I remember when that opened, I remember thinking, we don't need a casino in Valley Forge.
Right. Rolling over in this car.
You know, anyway. But right, we want to do what's good, but evil lines close at hand. So even though God's made this new covenant with us through Christ, based on faith, again, if the covenant is a way of establishing a relationship, what's our end of the bargain? How do we participate in this relationship with God through this new covenant? The old covenant was do the works of the law. You do's and you don'ts. You oughts and you shoulds. And Jeremiah, okay, God's like, it's not working. I'll make a new covenant. I'm going to write it on your hearts. 500 years later, Jesus comes in. God in the flesh, sacrifice for sin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, now how do we, again, kind of participate in this covenant that God has established on God's end? Yeah, y'all still kind of with me a little bit here? Okay, so, and so that's where faith comes in. That's really kind of what Romans 3 is about that I made reference to. Let's look at that real fast. Listen, if this gets kind of boring, y'all, and kind of like, okay, we've kind of heard all this before. I know that we've all heard all this before. If you go to church for any amount of time, eventually all this will start sounding familiar. But I think it's helpful to just at least tie it to the text. Where do these ideas come from? We talk about it, right? Washed in the blood of Jesus. That sounds kind of gross to be washed in someone's blood, but it's biblical language. So how do we understand it? Okay, what do we do with these ideas? Where they come from? How do they hold together in a deeper kind of way? So again, irrespective of the law, aka the old covenant, God's righteousness has been revealed through faith in Jesus Christ. No distinction, all have sinned, but we are now justified by his grace. That's fancy churchy language for saying we are now made right with God. We have a right relationship with God through God's free gift called grace, through redemption that's in Christ Jesus. Meaning, if you're a slave, you can't earn enough money to buy your own freedom if you're a slave. Redemption is literally like to buy the freedom of a slave. We were slaves to sin and death. And now we're redeemed, freed, et cetera, et cetera. That's something that we can't do ourselves, but is done in Christ Jesus, whom God put forward as a sacrifice of atonement by his blood. Sacrifice of atonement by his blood is code for covenant language, hearkening back to the Old Testament. Make sense? Again, like I mentioned at the very, very beginning, how do we understand? How did Paul and the other first century Christians who are pretty much all Jewish, how did they understand what happened? Well, this is how they understood. It's effective through faith. Passed over sins previously committed, proof of the present time that God himself is righteous. And he establishes a relationship, justifies, okay, that's justification. Justification is establishing a relationship, a right relationship with God, okay? The one who has faith in Jesus has this right relationship with God, that it's effective. All right. Well, then, can you brag about it? No, you can't really. By what law? By the law of works? No, but by the law of faith. And he kind of plays around with some language here. Law of faith is kind of oxymoronic. It's kind of like an oxymoron. All right. And then sort of the conclusion, for we hold that a person is made right with God by faith, apart from works prescribed by the law. And that really right there is sort of the theme verse for at least the first half of Romans. By the way, because we're good Lutherans, this text is read on Reformation Sunday as the second lesson. Jeremiah 31 is paired with it as the first reading. So if you were to hold these two texts together, we Lutherans like to try to show how they're coherent with each other, how they kind of mesh with each other. That kind of makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'm going to be quiet now. I'm going to let y'all talk. So there's a lot there. What do y'all think?
Well, I think with each covenant, the barrier between man and God gets decreased.
Okay.
I mean, if you look at the first covenant, with Abraham and then all the rules that needed to be followed.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've ever read the book A Year of Living Biblically by A.J. Jacobs, who's a nice Jewish fellow that decided for a year he was going to follow all of the Levitical laws to the extent that he carried around his own chair so he didn't have to ask women if they were unclean.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Huh.
it's a fun book to read. He carried little stones
Okay.
so that when his kids talked back to them, he could throw these little stones like from the bottom of a fish tank at his children and stone them as required for disobedience.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Huh.
And
Wow.
so it's up, the original laws were just too much that, you would sin by accident. And a lot of times, like Job was giving sacrifices in case any of his children accidentally sinned and didn't know it. And so he would atone for them.
Right.
It was just too much for anybody. And so each time we made it easier and easier till finally on the cross, the last one is just have faith in me. And, this is my body given for you. This is my blood shed for you. And now that's something that's relatively easy enough, I guess, that even us as sinful people can follow it. I mean, that's one of the things I take away from this.
What else?
Well, I see that no matter what we do, God's always going to be there for us. And he's going to keep all his promises. He doesn't go back on his promises to us.
Yeah. That's good covenant language. Right? God's faithful.
Yeah.
To the covenant.
Well, I think that is written in our heart gives me hope for the future generations. That it really is written in their heart what they should be doing, even though they have that freedom of choice. If it's written in their hearts, maybe future generations will take heart to that and follow that more fully. I hope anyhow. That's my hope. Because I think right now we have some problems with some of our young people. They just seem to be drifting away. So I'm hoping that it works.
What exactly, Pastor Christian, did Martin Luther mean when he said, sin and sin boldly?
Question. So let's go back to Romans 7. So Romans 7, what should then we say? Law is sin? No, the law is not sin. But sin seized an opportunity, deceives you, The law is spiritual, but I'm the flesh. Don't understand my own actions. When I want to do good, when I want to do what is good, evil lies close at hand. Okay, so this famous quote of Luther, sin boldly, yet rejoice in the grace of Christ more boldly still. Okay, that's kind of the quote, Ruth Ann, that I think you're thinking of. Does that sound right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So Luther's realization, and I think what he's trying to remind us, is that no matter what we do, there's going to be sin involved. Let's say you're going through life and you're not sure what the right thing to do is, but you need to do something. And in Luther's cup half empty way of thinking, whatever you do, there's going to be sin involved. But you're going to have to act. You got to do something. So you might as well be decisive, do what you need to do, and be bold about it. Sin boldly. Because no matter what you do, evil lies close at hand. You think you're doing good, but it might turn out bad, but you got to do it anyway. Does that kind of make sense? If you're going to be paralyzed worrying about whether you're committing sin or not, then you need to rejoice more boldly in the grace of Christ. We live imperfect lives and we're sinners no matter what. Yeah, even though we have faith and the love of God has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit. Okay, that's Romans 5. Then notice that's Romans 5. The love of God has been poured into our hearts by the Holy Spirit. But you go 2 chapters later and you have this. Paul wants to do good, but he can't. Okay. Luther's point is we're sinners, but at the same time, we're also righteous through faith. We're saints. And if we're going to sin, might as well be bold about it, but rejoice in the grace of Christ more boldly still. Now, the context for that quote of Luther's, a little bit of history here, and I'll try to be brief about it. It's 1530. The Reformation has been going on in Germany for about 9-10 years. Okay, maybe a little longer, depending on when you count when it started. Okay. The German Lutheran territories, or the Lutheran territories in Germany, okay, are considered political outlaws, heretics, rebels. Politics gets involved. They're considered heretics by the Roman Catholic Church. But the Lutherans in Germany at the time, there's enough of them and they have enough power politically that the powers that be that are Roman Catholic can't just march in and stomp them and put an end to it all. Okay, y'all still with me?
Mhm.
So the emperor at the time, a guy named Charles V, who's very Roman Catholic, decides to call a meeting of all the nobles in Germany, Lutheran and Catholic, in a town called Augsburg. And the Lutheran nobles, the Lutheran dukes, said, we need to have a confession of faith. This is what we believe. And we're going to bring it to the table. And if the Roman Catholics can convince us otherwise, great. But they're not going to be able to. And we know this makes us outlaws. All right. And it might mean war, but too darn bad. Luther at the time is an outlaw. He's not allowed to attend this meeting. But Luther's right-hand man, a guy named Philip Melanchthon, is allowed to attend the meeting. And Melanchthon is the one who basically writes the Confession of Faith for the Lutherans. It's called the Augsburg Confession. So, leading up to the meeting, Melanchthon's going to read his confession to the emperor. This is in July. Okay. Luther is holed away in a castle about 20 miles away, just kind of over the territorial border where he can be safe and not get arrested as an outlaw. And Luther and Melanchthon are writing letters back and forth. Melanchthon is terrified of what might happen. Luther, who's not there, is trying to encourage him. And so Luther's encouragement is, look, quit trying to get it perfect. There's no way you're going to get your confession perfect. There's no way the Augsburg confession is going to be perfect. It just needs to be good enough. Sin boldly, yet rejoice in the grace of Christ more boldly still. And that's the whole context of the quote. So then, of course, Melanchthon reads the confession. The emperor rejects it. And 17 years later, there's a war and the Lutherans are defeated. But by then, Luther died. And then there's another war. That was 1530, 1555. There's a truce. And it's been history ever since, as far as Protestants and Catholics in Europe. That's a whole nother story. So does that help answer your question, Ruth Ann?
I think so. It's very deep subject.
It is. I mean, for us to sit there, I mean, you know, you put that on a t-shirt, sin boldly, and people would be like, what? But rejoice more boldly in the grace of Christ. People would be like, wait, what? I think what Luther was trying to do in his own paradoxical way was sort of kind of sum up life. You know, what's the life of faith about? I mean, it's faith. There are plenty of times when we have to make decisions and do things that we might not see the end of. You know, we're kind of on a journey. We don't see the end of the journey.
Right.
We can hope and pray that we're doing God's will, but God doesn't always tell us what God's will is. Every now and then I'll use this example. Hey, God, am I supposed to go into the ministry? God pats me on the head and says, I love you. Hey, God, am I supposed to go into the ministry? What's your plan for my life? And God says, my son Jesus died for your sins. God, will you just tell me what I'm supposed to do? And God's like, you're forgiven. Right?
No.
There's no answer to that prayer other than, here's my grace. I could have just wasted 25 years of my life going into the ministry. I don't believe I did, but do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Sin boldly. God, am I supposed to be an electrician? God's like, I don't know. Do you want to be an electrician? So help me, God. Grace is free. I know that, God. Thank you for letting me know that grace is free. I really appreciate it. Oh, and you have the Holy Spirit too. Yeah, God, I get it. I got the Holy Spirit. That's nice. But what am I supposed to do with my life? Am I supposed to marry this person? Do you love them? God, you're not helping me. I think I love them. Well, okay. I'm being kind of joking, but I'm also being half serious. How many of us live our lives like that? I think a lot of us do, and I think that's what Luther's trying to get at. That uncertainty, that unknown, the mystery to our lives. And yeah, we might not know the plan, but what we do know is that we have God's grace and forgiveness and mercy and everything that comes with Jesus Christ. Or as Melanchthon would put it, Christ's benefits. We have Christ's benefits. Everything else is saint and sinner at the same time. Any of that helpful?
Mhm.
I like the thought of Christ's benefits. I never thought of it
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So Melanchthon had a bumper sticker that was, to know Christ is to know his benefits. To know Christ is to know the benefits.
So the benefits are kind of like the fruit of the spirit.
The context of Melanchthon's bumper sticker was people in the medieval church, talking about these big grand theories about Jesus being fully human, fully divine. And how do you understand that? If Jesus is fully divine, then could he make a rock too big for him to move? I mean, you know what I mean? It's like kind of this weird stuff. And Melanchthon's like, no, to know Christ is to know his benefits, period. And that's the gospel. That's the for you part for my sermon this past Sunday. It was this past Sunday, right? With the angels. I had to sit there and think about what I preached about 3 days ago. Because I did my sermon for this Sunday yesterday. So that's kind of why, kind of lead a schizophrenic existence. So listen, y'all, I think we've kind of exhausted the topic of covenants. What do y'all think?
Yeah.
What do y'all want to talk about next?
Oh, I think we should talk about the 12 days of Christmas.
Ooh, that's great. Okay, that's perfect.
Is
So
it?
this upcoming Thursday will be the 12 days of Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, when do they start? On Christmas or 12 days before Christmas? I never knew.
On Christmas, I think Christmas Day, I think is the first day of Christmas. I think that's right.
Okay.
And it runs through January 6th, the day of Epiphany, the wise men.
Okay.
However, if you want to celebrate the 12 days of Christmas before Christmas, you can do that and celebrate another 12 days of Christmas after Christmas. Maybe that's what we need to do, actually. That'll be the sin boldly part. We'll sin boldly celebrating Christmas for 24 days, but we'll be rejoicing in the grace of Christmas more boldly still.
That's when you take the tree down and eat up all the Christmas cookies.
Yeah. All right. Any other comments? Any other thoughts?
Oh, that's good.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
Me too.
Cool. All righty. Anyone have any other thoughts, comments, thoughts, questions? Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And
You made the right decision to become a minister.
thank you, Joyce. I think I did too. Although I did question it for a while there. That was years ago. But yeah.
He's good with older people and he's good with little children. I've watched that.
And he puts up
Don't
with
know
me.
about the. I'm sorry, what?
And you put up with me.
Aw, Shaw, more like the other way around.
We're done, Clark.
Yeah, we're done.
Are we done? I'm
Good
sorry.
night, Clark.
He was out, he was out, I think he got called like Superman. And he had to leave and go rescue
There you go.
someone.
Yeah.
He just got back in his regular clothes.
Out of the phone booth.
Quick change artist.
Yep, rip that shirt apart.
There you go.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, y'all. And y'all have a good night and see y'all in the next few days.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
All right.
Have a good night.
Good night.